A museum curator walks into the wrong ballroom, and a gunshot shatters the vows. The groom's dangerous brother wraps his jacket around her and claims her as his fiancée. On camera. Protection, he says. A lie, she thinks. But when a red laser finds her chest at a stoplight, the lie starts to feel like the only safe place left. At his glass tower, doors lock, rules land, and chemistry sparks where it shouldn't. Then a secret slips out, a sliver of old paper hidden in her locket, pointing to a missing ledger that could burn the city. Someone powerful wants her silenced. Someone inside his circle is feeding the enemy. The chapel everyone fears may be the vault everyone's hunting. If she stays, she could end a king. If she runs, she could get them both killed. When the trap finally snaps shut, will fake fiancé become the one bond that saves them, or the promise that buries them? Eden's hands shook as she gripped the leather seat, the tote bag of donor folders now crushed against her chest like a shield. Rain hammered against bulletproof glass, each drop echoing the staccato of her pulse. The city lights blurred past in streaks of neon and emergency red. Kellen Moretti sat beside her, one arm stretched across the back of her seat, his presence both shelter and cage. His expensive cologne couldn't quite mask the acrid scent of gunpowder that clung to his crisp white shirt. "Breathe," he said, voice low and steady. "You're safe." Safe was not the word Eden would have chosen. Safe didn't involve armed men in tactical gear flanking their vehicle. Safe wasn't the weight of a stranger's suit jacket draped over her bare shoulders, still warm from his body. "I'm breathing just fine," she managed, proud that her voice barely wavered. "What I'm not doing is understanding why you just told everyone I'm your fiancé." His profile was sharp against the passing lights, all clean angles and dangerous beauty. "Because dead women tell no tales, Miss Clark, but fiancés are protected." The casual mention of death made her stomach lurch. "I need to call my boss at the museum, the donors. Your work can wait until we ensure your survival." He didn't even look at her, his attention on the side mirror, as their convoy navigated the rain-slicked streets. "Right now, you're a liability. You saw faces you weren't meant to see, heard names, witnessed an attempted hit." "I saw a wedding gone wrong," Eden countered, clinging to logic like a lifeline. Nothing more. Now he did look at her, and the intensity of his pale eyes made her breath catch. "You're smart enough to know better. Museum conservator, specializing in Renaissance pigments and authentication. Published papers on cipher patterns in medieval manuscripts. You don't miss details." The fact that he knew her credentials sent a chill down her spine. "How?" "I had your ID run the moment you walked through those doors. Knowledge is survival." His thumb brushed her shoulder, through the jacket. Probably unconsciously, but the touch sparked like electricity. "The question is what to do with you now." Eden straightened her spine, refusing to cower. "The answer is simple. Drop me at my apartment, I'll forget everything I saw." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth, more warning than humor. "Impossible. The moment you entered that ballroom, you became part of this. The cameras caught us leaving together. By morning, every family in the city will know your face, your name, your connection to me. A connection you invented. A connection that will keep you alive." His voice hardened. "Unless you prefer I release you now, let you take your chances with the people who just tried to kill my brother on his wedding day." The rain grew heavier, drums of water against metal and glass, creating a cocoon of white noise around them. Eden forced herself to think past the fear, past the surreal nature of this night. "What exactly does being your fiancé entail?" she asked carefully. "Protection, resources, a cover story that explains why I'm keeping you close." His hand shifted from the seat to her shoulder, and she couldn't tell if the gesture was meant to comfort or control. "In return, you play your part. Attend the right events, smile for the right photos. Let me handle the rest." "And how long does this charade last?" "Until the threat is eliminated and you're no longer at risk." The simple way he spoke of elimination made her shiver. "Days, weeks, however long it takes." Eden looked down at her broken heel, at the runs in her stockings from running through kitchen corridors. Her entire life had shattered like those aisle lights in the space of an hour. But beneath the fear, beneath the shock, something else stirred. A familiar stubborn streak that made her lift her chin. "I have conditions," she said. Kellen's eyebrows rose fractionally. "You're not in a position to negotiate." "I'm always in a position to negotiate." Eden met his gaze steadily. "You need my cooperation to sell this story. So here are my terms. I keep my job at the museum. I maintain my own apartment. I won't be a prisoner." Out of the question. Your safety is important, yes, but so is my life's work. I'm in the middle of a major restoration project. I won't abandon it. The muscle in his jaw ticked as he studied her. Rain drummed against the roof. In the front seat, his driver remained silent, professional enough to pretend he couldn't hear every word. You'll have security with you at all times, Kellen finally said. You'll live in my building, not your current apartment. Non-negotiable. His fingers traced the line of her shoulder, feather-light. The museum we can discuss, provided you accept proper protection protocols. It wasn't perfect, but it was more than she'd expected to win. Agreed. Brave little negotiator, he murmured, and something in his tone made her pulse jump. But remember this. The moment I decide your safety requires more control, these terms become void. I won't risk your life for your independence. The possessive edge in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent an inappropriate shiver down her spine. Eden forced herself to look away from him, out at the city streaming past in ribbons of light and shadow. Where are we going now? She asked. Somewhere secure, while my men sweep your apartment and arrange the move. His hand finally left her shoulder, and she tried to ignore how cold she felt without his touch. Try to rest. Tomorrow will be complicated enough without exhaustion. Eden closed her eyes, feeling the motion of the vehicle, the weight of his jacket, the lingering warmth of his fingers on her skin. Tomorrow would be more than complicated. It would be the beginning of a dangerous game she'd never meant to play, with a man who dealt in death but touched her like she was made of glass. The convoy streaked along the rain-slicked waterfront, 3 black SUVs moving in tight formation through the empty streets. Eden watched droplets race down the bulletproof glass, trying to steady her breathing as Kellen spoke in that measured voice that seemed designed to both calm and command. The story is simple, he said, his phone casting blue light across his sharp features. We've been seeing each other quietly for months. Tonight was meant to be our public debut at the wedding, which explains why no one knew about us before. A convenient fiction, Eden said, fingers twisting in the fabric of his jacket. It still draped her shoulders, smelling of sandalwood and gunpowder. Convenience keeps people alive. He looked up from his phone, studying her with those winter gray eyes. Right now, you're either my fiancé, or you're a witness who saw too much. Choose carefully. Take me home, she demanded, though her voice shook. I won't be part of your world. My world already has you. His tone softened fractionally. Someone tried to kill my brother today. They saw you with me. Until we know who's behind this, you're a target. You don't know that for... The red dot appeared on her chest like a drop of blood, dancing over her heart. Eden didn't even have time to scream before Kellen moved, his body covering hers as he slammed her down across the seat. Glass shattered somewhere, and Benny swerved hard, tires screaming. Marina! Kellen barked into his comm, one hand cradling Eden's head while the other reached for his weapon. Route change. Now. Eden could barely breathe, crushed between leather seats and his solid warmth. Her heart hammered against his chest as the convoy accelerated, taking corners so fast she would have slid if not for his weight anchoring her. Are you hit? He demanded, hands moving over her with clinical efficiency. No, she managed. What was... Sniper! Proof that going home isn't an option. He didn't move off her until they'd crossed 3 bridges and reached the private marina, its sleek yachts bobbing like ghost ships in the rain. The convoy pulled into an underground garage beneath a towering glass building that seemed to pierce the storm clouds. Kellen helped Eden out, his touch gentler than she expected from hands that had just reached for a gun. This is Benny Cruz, he said, nodding to the driver who'd gotten them through the chaos. Former combat medic. He'll be part of your security detail. Benny's smile was kind beneath his tactical gear. Welcome to the family, Miss Clark. Eden wanted to protest that she wasn't family, wasn't anything but a woman who'd walked through the wrong door, but Kellen was already moving her toward private elevators with mirrored walls that reflected her disheveled state. 2 rules, he said as they ascended. Don't run, don't lie, break either and I can't protect you. The elevator opened onto a plush corridor where a small boy sat crying on a bench, a woman in a housekeeper's uniform trying to comfort him. Eden expected Kellen to stride past. He seemed the type to delegate emotional labor, but he stopped, crouching to the child's level. Hey there, Marco, he said, voice warming to something she hadn't heard before. Bad dream again? The boy nodded, hiccuping. The thunder? Thunder's just the sky telling stories. Kellen produced a candy from his pocket like magic. Want to know a secret? Even I was scared of storms when I was your age, but you're brave like your mama, right? Marco took the candy, managing a wobbly smile. Gracias, Mr. Moretti. Eden watched, something shifting in her chest as Kellen squeezed the boy's shoulder before standing. This glimpse of gentleness felt more dangerous than any gun. It made him human, made him harder to dismiss as just another criminal in an expensive suit. That humanity vanished 10 steps later when his phone buzzed. The roof wasn't swept. His voice turned to pure ice, making Eden flinch. No excuses. Show Martinez what happens when negligence endangers the family. Make it memorable. The contrast between his tenderness with Marco and the casual cruelty of that order made Eden's head spin. She followed him down the hall in silence, trying to reconcile the man who soothed a child's fears with one who ordered punishment as easily as breathing. The penthouse doors opened onto a space that seemed carved from glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the storm-dark city. Rain traced silver patterns down the panes, creating an ethereal aquarium effect. The kitchen gleamed with untouched surfaces, all black marble and brushed metal, clearly more showroom than home. Kellen shrugged off his own jacket, the white shirt beneath still pristine despite everything. He moved to a hidden safe, entering a code Eden deliberately turned away from, and withdrew something small. The velvet box made a soft sound as he placed it on the kitchen island between them. "You'll need this for the cameras tomorrow," he said. "The press will expect a ring." Eden stared at that innocent-looking box, understanding that it represented far more than jewelry. It was a collar, a chain, a symbol of protection that doubled as a cage. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, but she didn't open it yet. Some part of her knew that once she did, once she slipped whatever diamond lay inside onto her finger, there would be no going back. The morning light filtered through rain-washed windows, turning the penthouse into a crystalline fishbowl. Eden wrapped her fingers around a steaming coffee mug, the porcelain warm against her palms. On the counter beside her sat a cream silk blouse, perfectly her size, with the tag still attached. The silent efficiency of Kellen's staff unnerved her. She'd already tested the exits. The elevator needed his fingerprint, the balcony doors were wired with alarms, and even the service entrance had a keypad that would alert security. She was in a beautiful cage, but a cage nonetheless. Kellen stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his broad shoulders rigid beneath another impeccable suit. "Handle the press, Enzo. I don't care what story you spin about postponing the wedding. Just keep our interests secure." Eden watched him, noting how his face hardened the moment business intruded. Gone was any trace of the man who'd comforted Marco last night. In daylight, he was all sharp edges and cold calculation. "The shooter?" He turned, catching her staring. "No confirmation yet. Sweep every camera feed within 10 blocks. His eyes locked with hers as he added, "And double security on our new guest." A photographer arrived at 9, setting up lights on the rain-damp terrace while Eden struggled to keep her hands steady. The ring Kellen had given her, a stunning oval diamond that probably cost more than her annual salary, felt heavy on her finger. "Smile," Kellen murmured, his hand warm on her lower back. "You're madly in love with me, remember?" She managed a believable laugh for the camera, leaning into him as if they shared secrets. "The shooter," she whispered through her smile. "Who were they aiming for? Your brother? You?" His fingers tightened slightly on her waist. "Curious little conservator, aren't you? If I'm risking my life playing your fiancé, I deserve answers." The photographer directed them to face each other. Kellen cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her jawline, in a gesture that looked intimate but felt like a warning. "You were already at risk, Eden. That's why you caught my attention." "What are you talking about?" He waited until the photographer moved to adjust lighting before speaking. "Your father's restoration studio. Before the fire, he worked on some sensitive items, including a leather ledger from the 1920s. Aiden's breath caught. I make it my business to know everything about potential threats." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of an aged leather book with brass corners. "Recognize it?" She did. She remembered the careful way her father had handled it, how he'd worked late into the night on its delicate pages. A week later, the studio burned. "The ledger survived," Kellen said quietly, "and certain people are very interested in its contents. People who might have noticed when you started asking questions about your father's old clients." The photographer called for them to pose by the railing. Eden moved mechanically, her mind racing. Had her research into the studio's records drawn attention? Made her a target? Kellen played the devoted fiancé perfectly, wrapping her in his arms as if shielding her from the wind. To anyone watching, they looked like a power couple in love, the dangerous enforcer and his cultured bride. But Eden felt the steel beneath his gentle touches, the way he positioned himself between her and the neighboring building's sightlines. The photo session dragged on, a dance of fake intimacy and whispered revelations. By the time the photographer packed up, Eden's cheeks ached from forced smiles, and her nerves were frayed from Kellen's proximity. "The press will eat this up," he said, scanning the preview images. "Star-crossed lovers who met at a gallery opening last month. Very romantic." "Is any part of your life real?" she asked. Something flickered in his eyes. "The parts that keep people alive." He checked his watch. "I have meetings. Make yourself comfortable. But remember the rules." Eden spent the afternoon pacing her luxurious prison, trying to piece together the connection between her father's work and her current situation. The guest suite Kellen had given her was larger than her apartment, with a bathroom straight out of a spa magazine, but she barely noticed the amenities. As evening settled over the city, she sat cross-legged on the bed, running her fingers over her mother's old locket. It was the only piece of jewelry she'd brought from home, worn more out of habit than sentiment. The silver was tarnished, despite her care, the hinge slightly loose. Her nail caught on a seam she'd never noticed before, near the edge where the halves met. Frowning, she pressed gently. Something shifted inside. Not the usual click of the latch, but a softer sound. A sliver of aged paper slid into her palm, yellow-edged and delicate as moth wings. Her heart stopped as she recognized the distinctive texture, the faint ruled lines, ledger parchment, hidden in her mother's locket all this time. "What were you involved in, Dad?" she whispered, staring at the paper as if it might whisper back answers about the fire, about Kellen's surveillance, about why her ordinary life had suddenly become entangled with the city's most dangerous family. Beyond her windows, the sky deepened to indigo, city lights sparking to life like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, a sniper had tried to kill someone at a Mafia wedding. Somewhere, her father's mysterious ledger held secrets worth killing for. And here she sat, trapped in a penthouse with a man who moved between tenderness and violence as easily as stepping through doorways. Eden carefully slid the paper back into its hiding place. Whatever game she'd stumbled into, she needed to play it smart. Kellen Moretti might control her movements, but he didn't control her mind. And she had always been good at solving puzzles, especially ones written in her father's hand. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight as Eden padded across the penthouse's darkened living room. Her bare feet made no sound on the marble floors, but she knew Kellen would hear her coming anyway. He seemed to hear everything. His office door stood ajar, spilling a wedge of amber light. Inside, an entire wall flickered with security feeds. The Mariner Hotel's shattered ballroom, dock workers moving between shipping containers, the museum's delivery entrance where her conservation team usually worked. Kellen sat at his desk, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to expose corded forearms. He didn't look up from his laptop. "You should be sleeping. I found something." Eden's voice was steady despite her racing pulse. She held up the locket. "In here." That got his attention. His eyes locked onto the necklace, then her face. "Show me." She approached his desk, hyper-aware of how the silk pajamas he'd provided whispered against her skin. With trembling fingers, she worked the seam open again and extracted the yellowed scrap. Kellen cleared space on his desk, switching on a brass lamp that cast a warm circle of light. He didn't reach for the fragment, waited for her to place it down, as if recognizing her need for control in this small thing. "It's ledger paper," she said. "The same kind as in your photo. When did you find this?" "An hour ago. I've had this locket since my mother died, but I never knew." She swallowed. "What's in the ledger that makes it worth killing for?" Kellen leaned back, studying her. Proof. Names, dates, transactions that could destroy Rocco Valley's entire operation. His uncle used it to record every bribe, every official he owned. When the old man died, the ledger vanished. "And my father had it. He restored it, but before he could return it, there was a fire." Kellen's voice softened fractionally. "We always suspected fragments were hidden around the city. Your father was clever." Eden bent over the paper, using her conservator's eye to study the faded marks. "These aren't just numbers. See the patterns? They're pigment codes, specific color formulations used in art restoration. My father taught me to read them." "What do they mean?" "They're like coordinates, reference points for matching paint colors to originals." She traced the sequence. But these combinations don't make sense for normal restoration. They're too specific, too deliberate. Kellen moved closer, his presence solid and warm at her shoulder. Could they point to locations? Places where other fragments might be hidden? Maybe. During that time period, there was a major heist at the Morgan. Collection? Eden's eyes widened. Oh God! The stolen pieces were never recovered, but rumors said they were hidden in plain sight, incorporated into other artworks around the city. Your father wasn't just restoring art, Kellen said quietly. He was helping hide evidence. Eden sank into the chair across from his desk, legs unsteady. To protect himself or someone else? Both, probably. Kellen's hand settled on her shoulder, surprisingly gentle. But we can use this. Rocco's been hunting the ledger for years. If word gets out that the Morettis have a conservator who can decode these marks, you want to bait him. It wasn't a question. We make him think we're close to finding the whole ledger. He'll move against us directly instead of through proxies like the wedding shooter. Kellen reached for his phone. Enzo can start spreading the story tonight. Eden stared at the fragment, her father's secret messages swimming before her eyes. All those years of teaching her pigment theory, restoration techniques, had he been preparing her? Giving her the keys to a cipher she might someday need? She grabbed a notepad from Kellen's desk, began listing paintings from the right time period. These would have been in restoration during the months before the heist. If my father helped hide fragments, he would have chosen pieces that needed legitimate work, ones that wouldn't raise suspicion. Kellen spoke quietly into his phone, giving Enzo instructions about the narrative they'd build. The Moretti's new art expert, their certainty about finding the ledger, their willingness to deal with anyone who had information. Eden's pen flew across the paper, adding dates and locations. I can check these pieces first thing tomorrow. Most are in the museum's permanent collection. You're not going alone. The conservation lab opens at dawn. I have clearance, and you'll have protection. His tone allowed no argument. We do this carefully, Eden. There's no rush. She looked up, found him watching her with that unnerving intensity. There's always a rush when Rocco Valley is involved, isn't there? A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. True, but we control the pace. He studied her list. Get some sleep. I'll have Benny ready to drive at 6. Eden stood, gathering her notes and the precious fragment. At the door, she paused. Why are you being so careful with me? You could just take this information, use your own people. Because you're an asset now, and I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. You're wearing my ring, living under my protection, helping take down my enemy. His voice remained mild, but his eyes were anything but. For now, that makes you mine. Eden returned to her room, set her alarm for dawn, and tried not to think about how that possessive statement made her shiver. She had a job to do, decrypt her father's codes, find the hidden fragments, understand why he'd chosen this dangerous path. Sleep was a long time coming. The gray light of dawn stretched across the city as their sedan pulled out of the tower garage. Eden sat in the back with Kellen while Benny navigated the empty streets, all three maintaining a watchful silence. Her phone lit up with a quick text to Bianca. Need early access, condition check on the Harriman Harbor piece for next month's conservation schedule. The response came swiftly. Security notified. Use my code. The museum's limestone facade loomed ahead, its windows dark except for security lights. Eden's hands trembled slightly as she input Bianca's access code at the service entrance. The familiar scent of wood polish and aged canvas greeted them as they moved through the shadowed corridors. Frame room's this way, Eden whispered, though they were alone. Kellen's presence behind her felt like a heat signature, watchful and controlled. Benny, the service hall intersects here. You'll see anyone coming from either direction. Benny nodded, taking position with casual competence. Inside the frame room, Eden moved purposefully to the large harbor scene, its gilt frame catching weak light from the windows. Kellen closed the door with a soft click. Smugglers love stretcher bars, she explained, carefully lifting the painting from its wall mount. They're the wooden supports behind the canvas, perfect for hiding flat items. Her fingers worked methodically around the frame's edge. These older pieces were often retrofitted with new supports. Perfect opportunity to slip something inside. Kellen watched her work, his attention divided between her movements and the door. How many people have access to this room? Conservation staff, senior curators, security. Eden eased the painting onto the work table. Bianca manages the scheduling. No one else should be here this early. The radio at Kellen's hip crackled. Benny's voice was low but urgent. 3 hostiles in the garage. Moving fast. Kellen's transformation was instant and terrifying. The careful observer became a weapon, every movement precise and deadly. Stay here. Lock the door. Open only for my voice. He was gone before she could protest, leaving her alone with the painting and her thundering heart. She forced her hands steady, continuing to work while straining to hear any sound from the hallway. Minutes stretched like hours, a muffled thud, the crack of what might have been a bone breaking, footsteps, then silence. When Kellen returned, his collar bore a spray of red and his knuckles were scraped raw, but his voice remained perfectly calm. We're clear. Keep working. Eden swallowed hard, focusing on the stretcher bar she'd partially loosened. Her trembling fingers caught a seam that shouldn't exist. Here, there's something. Using a thin metal probe from her conservation kit, she carefully extracted a strip of vellum no wider than her thumb. The same precise number sequences from her father's fragment marked its surface in faded ink. Another piece, Kellen said softly, examining it over her shoulder. Your father's code. Same pattern. Eden's voice shook slightly. The pigment formulas are different, but it's definitely part of the sequence. They reseated the painting with meticulous care, leaving no trace of their examination. The drive back to the penthouse was tense, Benny taking a circuitous route while Kellen made calls in a voice like Arctic wind. Eden caught fragments about cleanup and messages sent that made her shiver. Late afternoon sun filled the penthouse when they finally returned. Eden paced the living room while news channels buzzed about the underboss's mysterious fiancé and speculation about the Moretti family's sudden interest in the arts. The adrenaline crash left her jittery and cold. Kellen watched her from the kitchen, his bloody collar replaced, hands cleaned but still bearing marks from whatever violence had occurred in the garage. He moved like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just killed to protect their search. Eden stopped pacing, staring at him. He'd been ruthless and lethal, yes, but also calculating and controlled. He'd kept her safe. The realization hit her with physical force. She trusted him. Despite everything, or because of it, she trusted him. She crossed to where he stood, rose on her toes, and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he remained still. Then his hands came up to frame her face, and he kissed her back with careful intensity, like a man afraid to break something precious. When she whispered slow against his mouth, he immediately gentled his touch, then stepped back just enough to study her face. Without a word, he retrieved a soft throw from the couch and wrapped it around her shoulders, his fingers lingering on her arms. Rest, he said quietly. We'll decode the new fragment when you're steadier. Eden sank into the corner of the couch, pulled the blanket tighter, and tried not to think about how his kiss had felt like coming home. On the TV, a reporter droned on about the Moretti family's art acquisitions, while security footage showed Eden and Kellen leaving the museum, his hand protective at her lower back. The new fragment sat in a sealed evidence bag on the coffee table, its secrets waiting to be unraveled. Eden's father had woven this trail of breadcrumbs through the city's art collections, each piece leading to another, building toward some larger truth. She watched Kellen move through the penthouse, speaking softly into his phone, coordinating whatever aftermath the morning's violence had created. He was a study in contrasts, the gentle way he'd kissed her versus the efficient brutality he'd shown their attackers. The careful attention he paid to her comfort versus the cold precision of his business dealings. Eden touched her lips, still feeling the phantom pressure of his kiss, and wondered if she was falling for the man or the mystery, or if somehow they were the same thing. The evening sky had darkened to indigo when the penthouse elevator chimed. Enzo Moretti stepped out, his wedding tuxedo artfully disheveled, bow tie hanging loose around his neck. He carried an ice-frosted bottle of Dom Perignon in one hand and wore the same easy smile that had charmed society photographers hours earlier. For the almost newlyweds, he announced, setting the champagne on the kitchen island. And my sincere apologies for the excitement at what should have been my quiet little ceremony. Eden watched him from her perch on the couch, blanket still draped around her shoulders. Where Kellen moved like a predator, even in stillness, Enzo glided with practiced grace, all charm and golden boy warmth. Quiet ceremony, she asked. In the Mariner's grand ballroom. Enzo's laugh sparkled like the champagne. Fair point, though the gunfire wasn't part of the original program. He loosened his collar further, revealing a flash of tattoo beneath crisp white cotton. That whole production was meant to smoke out a rat. The shooter wasn't aiming for you, Bella. Wrong place, wrong time, though my brother seems to think it was the right place after all. He winked. Aiden felt Kellen tense beside her, though his expression remained neutral. Enzo's charm was too perfect, too practiced. It set off warning bells she couldn't quite name. Speaking of the wedding, Enzo continued, the society pages are already speculating about a double ceremony. The mysterious art expert who captured the elder Moretti's heart. He trailed off suggestively. You're supposed to be handling press control, Kellen said, his voice carrying an edge. And I am, brother. I am. Enzo spread his hands. The engagement story is selling beautifully. Even our friends across the bay are buying it. The way he emphasized friends made it clear he meant enemies. Eden caught the subtle interplay between the brothers. Enzo's casual sprawl against the counter versus Kellen's coiled stillness. There was history there, complicated and deep. Now, Enzo said, about that ledger fragment. Later, Kellen cut him off. It's been a long day. Of course, of course. Enzo pushed away from the counter with fluid grace. I'll leave you lovebirds to your evening. Eden, always a pleasure. He bent to kiss her cheek, his cologne expensive and subtle. The elevator doors had barely closed when Kellen spoke. Never trust a smile that perfect. Eden rubbed her arms, suddenly chilled despite the blanket. He seems to know a lot about the ledger. Enzo knows pieces of everything. It's his job to know just enough to be useful. Kellen's jaw tightened. And to make sure others know just enough to be useful too. A discreet knock interrupted them. One of Kellen's security team entered with a white box tied with silver ribbon. Eden's name was written across the top in elegant script. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a single gardenia, its petals already beginning to brown at the edges. A card beneath read, You looked beautiful under the scope. R. Kellen's expression hardened to granite. He lifted his phone, barking orders to double the tower's perimeter security and sweep for surveillance devices. Eden touched the flower's wilting petals, remembering the red laser dot that had painted her chest outside the hotel. Her thoughts turned to Bianca, to the way her boss had been conveniently absent during the morning's attack, to her unusual access to restricted areas. The museum's provenance records might hold answers about both the ledger and Bianca's connection to it all. Eden pulled out her phone, composing a careful text. Need to review provenance files for the harbor painting. Coffee at Marcel's, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Important questions about recent acquisitions. She showed the message to Kellen before sending it. His eyes narrowed as he read, then he set his phone face down on the counter with deliberate care. Taking her hand, he led her to the kitchen, where the champagne sat unopened. We'll handle the meeting together, he said, his voice brooking no argument. No more solo moves. Eden started to protest but stopped when she saw his expression, not controlling but concerned. The gardenia's message had rattled him more than he let on. Together then, she agreed softly. He nodded once, tension easing fractionally from his shoulders. Outside, the city lights glimmered like stars fallen to earth, while inside the penthouse, plans and secrets hung in the air like smoke. Eden's phone buzzed with Bianca's reply, a simple thumbs-up emoji that somehow felt weighted with meaning. Kellen's security teams moved through their patterns on the streets below, shadows guarding against shadows. The gardenia's sickly sweet scent filled the air, a reminder that somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching, waiting, planning their next move in this deadly game of art and power. Eden looked at her reflection in the window, at Kellen's darker shape behind her, and wondered how many more secrets lay buried in her father's coded trail. The museum held answers, but it also held dangers. Tomorrow's meeting with Bianca would either clear a path forward or spring another trap. For now, though, she stood in the safety of Kellen's penthouse, his hand still warm around hers, while Enzo's champagne chilled and the city spun its web of light and shadow below. The night stretched ahead, full of possibilities and threats, each one tangled with the others, like the roots of some ancient poisonous tree. The gardenia's petals continued their slow decay in the white box, a countdown to morning, to answers, to whatever waited for them in the museum's quiet halls. Eden squeezed Kellen's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. Together, he'd said. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning chill cut through Eden's coat as she watched Bianca approach Marcel's coffee through the foggy window. Her boss wore oversized sunglasses despite the gray day. A silk scarf wound high around her neck. Something about her usual grace seemed fractured. Kellen's presence at a corner table, ostensibly absorbed in his phone, made the small cafe feel even smaller. He'd positioned himself with clear sightlines to both the door and their table, close enough to intervene but far enough to give an illusion of privacy. "Eden!" Bianca's voice cracked as she slid into the chair. "I'm so sorry." "For what exactly?" Eden kept her tone neutral, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. Bianca removed her sunglasses, revealing puffy eyes ringed with smudged makeup. Her hands trembled as she arranged her scarf. "Could we speak privately?" "No." Eden felt Kellen's attention sharpen across the room. "Whatever you need to say it here." "I never meant—" Bianca's composure cracked further. She lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. "I've been paying off debts to Rocco Valley. Small things at first. Information about certain pieces, steering specific items toward conservation." The coffee turned bitter in Eden's mouth. "The Mariner Hotel fundraiser? I told them you'd be there. Just that. I didn't know about the wedding or the shooting." Bianca's fingers twisted her napkin. "They said they only wanted to talk to you about some restoration work." Eden absorbed this betrayal with careful breaths, aware of Kellen watching them both. "How long?" 2 years. My brother got involved with Rocco's gambling operations. The debt kept growing. Then they threatened my niece." Bianca's eyes darted to Kellen. "I thought I could handle it quietly." "By sacrificing me?" The words came out sharper than intended. "No, I mean, I didn't think—" Bianca stopped, shoulders slumping. "There's no excuse. I was a coward." Eden studied her boss, mentor, friend, betrayer, in calculated angles of advantage. "We can help each other." Bianca's head snapped up. "What?" "You know where certain pieces are stored, items that might contain hidden documents." Eden leaned forward. "Help us find them, and Kellen will clear your debt, keep you breathing." "He'd do that?" "If I ask." Eden held Bianca's gaze. "But no more lies, no more games." Tears welled in Bianca's eyes. "There's something else you should know. Rocco has someone inside the Moretti organization, someone high up." "Enzo?" The question slipped out before Eden could stop it. "No, I don't think so. Someone older, someone they can't easily remove." Bianca dabbed her eyes with the mangled napkin. "They never said who, but they implied this person was essential. Indispensable." Eden felt Kellen shift in her peripheral vision. "Do you know where we might find more ledger fragments?" "The secondary storage vault." Bianca's voice steadied as she moved into familiar territory. "There's a seascape from the same period as the harbor painting. It came in around the same time as some of the other pieces your father worked on." An hour later, Eden stood in the climate-controlled vault while Kellen and Benny secured the perimeter. The seascape's gilt frame gleamed dully under the fluorescent lights as she carefully separated the dust cover from the backing board. Her fingers found it almost immediately. Another strip of aged parchment, this one longer than the others. The same pigment-based cipher marked its surface in fading brown ink. "Got it," she murmured, holding it up to the light. Kellen moved closer, his presence solid and reassuring at her back. He studied the fragment over her shoulder, then spoke so quietly she almost missed it. "Caro Bellini." The name hung in the air like smoke. Eden turned to face him, noting the tight set of his jaw, the shadow in his eyes. "The consigliere?" He gave a sharp nod, his expression haunted. "It fits. He's been with the family for decades, has access to everything, everyone trusts him." His voice roughened. "I trusted him." Benny's radio crackled with an all-clear from the hallway. Eden carefully placed the fragment in an acid-free envelope, while Kellen paced the narrow space between storage racks, his earlier stillness fractured by restless energy. The vault's metal shelving threw distorted reflections across the walls, making it seem like they were surrounded by watching figures. Eden remembered Bianca's warning about someone indispensable, someone older. The pieces were aligning with terrible clarity. She thought about trust and betrayal, about Bianca's tear-stained confession and Kellen's shaken faith. The ledger fragments were more than just coded papers. They were pulling threads that threatened to unravel everything. Kellen stopped pacing, his phone displaying a message that made his expression darken further. Outside, noon sun filtered through high windows, casting bars of light across the vault's floor like prison bars. The fragments in Eden's hand felt heavier than paper should. 3 pieces now, each one bringing them closer to answers while raising more dangerous questions. She watched Kellen check his weapon with mechanical precision and wondered how many more betrayals waited in the shadows of his world. Benny appeared in the doorway, professional mask slipping just enough to show concern as he looked at his boss. The vault suddenly felt too small, too exposed, despite the fortress-like museum walls surrounding them. The name Caro Bellini echoed in Eden's mind, wrapped in Kellen's reluctant voice. She tucked the envelope securely away, feeling the weight of secrets and lies pressing down like the thousands of pounds of architecture above them. The afternoon sun slanted through Kellen's office windows as Eden watched him pace, phone on speaker in the center of his glass desk. Caro Bellini's voice flowed smooth as aged whiskey through the room. "The situation requires delicacy, not force," Caro was saying. "We don't want to provoke Rocco further." Eden caught the slight tightening around Kellen's eyes. She'd been watching him all afternoon, seeing how his shoulders tensed whenever Caro spoke. "What about moving? Some assets?" Kellen asked, voice carefully neutral. "I'm thinking of setting up at the Martinez property on 4th. Ah, wise choice. Quiet neighborhood, good sightlines." Caro's approval came too quickly. After the call ended, Kellen typed rapidly on his phone while Eden studied the ledger fragments spread across his desk. Within an hour, Benny's text confirmed their suspicions. Rocco's men were circling the Martinez property like sharks scenting blood. "He fed it straight to them," Kellen said, voice low and dangerous. His fingers drummed once on the desk before going still. "We keep playing along. Let him think we trust him." Eden nodded, returning to the fragments. The coded numbers had started making a strange kind of sense, pigment ratios that didn't match any known restoration formula. She'd been plotting them on graph paper, watching patterns emerge. "Look at this," she said, sliding a page toward him. "These numbers, their dates and times, and these..." Her finger traced a series. Coordinates. They all point to St. Michael's Chapel. Kellen leaned closer, his warmth at her shoulder now familiar. "Rocco uses it for ceremonies. Likes the symbolism." The numbers suggest regular shipments. Next one's tomorrow night. Kellen's hand covered hers where it rested on the paper. "I'll send Benny to scout it." "I'm going too." Eden turned to face him. "The cipher's in my language. Pigments, conservation codes. You need me there to read it in real time." "It's not safe." "Nothing about this is safe." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm already in it. Let me be useful." A muscle worked in his jaw as he studied her. Finally, he nodded. "We go in quiet. First sign of trouble, you're out. No arguments." They spent the next hours planning, voices low as they moved markers on a satellite map of the chapel grounds. Eden memorized escape routes while Kellen arranged backup teams and surveillance gear. The familiar dance of preparation, but now with an edge of electricity between them that grew sharper as evening deepened into night. When they finally left his office, Eden's skin felt too tight, awareness crackling between them. She walked slightly ahead, hearing his measured steps behind her until they reached her door. She turned, words forming about tomorrow's plans, but they died in her throat at the look in his eyes. The careful distance he'd maintained all day crumbled as he stepped closer. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. Eden reached for him instead, rising on her toes as his mouth found hers. The kiss was nothing like their careful first one in the frame room. This was hunger and need, his hands spanning her waist as he walked her backward through the door. "Yes?" he asked against her throat, making it both question and demand. "Yes," she breathed, pulling him closer. "Please." They shed clothes between kisses, each touch deliberate and searching. He laid her on the bed, with unexpected gentleness, mapping her skin with calloused hands, until she arched against him, desperate for more. "Tell me what you want," he whispered, and she did. First in words, then in sighs and soft cries as he followed every request with devastating precision. When he finally pushed into her, Eden wrapped her legs around him, urging him deeper. His control frayed beautifully as she raked nails down his back, his rhythm turning fierce and perfect. She came apart under him with a broken gasp of his name, feeling him follow moments later, face buried in her neck. They lay tangled afterward, sweat cooling on their skin as rain began pattering against the windows. Eden traced idle patterns on his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart. "I lost someone once," he said suddenly, voice rough in the darkness. "Years ago, I hesitated when I shouldn't have, tried to handle things clean instead of brutal." His arms tightened around her. "By the time I corrected that mistake, she was already gone." Eden pressed closer, offering comfort through touch since words felt inadequate. The rain intensified, drumming against glass like fingers tapping out a warning. "I won't hesitate again," he murmured into her hair, and she heard the promise in it. Protection and possession twined together, beautiful and terrible as a blade. She thought of tomorrow's recon, of Caro's betrayal, and Rocco's threats, of the cipher that had pulled her into this dangerous dance. But here in the dark, with Kellen's heartbeat under her palm and his warmth surrounding her, She couldn't bring herself to regret any of it. The rain continued its steady rhythm as they lay entwined, neither sleeping, both aware that tomorrow would bring them closer to answers they might not be ready to face. But for now, there was just this, skin against skin, breath matching breath, and the strange peace found in accepting that some choices, once made, could never be unmade. Sunlight crept across the rumpled sheets, warming Eden's skin where it peeked above the covers. She stirred, conscious first of Kellen's arm draped across her waist, then of the pleasant ache in her muscles that reminded her of every heated moment from the night before. He was already awake, dark eyes tracking her movements as she stretched. Even relaxed, he held himself with that predator's awareness that never fully disappeared. "You're thinking too hard," Eden murmured, reaching up to smooth the furrow between his brows. Even this early. Force of habit. His fingers caught hers, pressing a kiss to her palm that made her breath catch. "You know," she said, propping herself up on one elbow, "being gentle isn't always a liability. Sometimes it saves lives better than brutality." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He studied their joined hands. "It will save yours," he said finally, voice rough with promise. They lingered only briefly over coffee before duty drew them to his office. The chapel blueprint spread across his desk looked different in daylight, less forbidding, more like a puzzle to be solved. "Main entrance here," Kellen traced the line with his finger. "Side door by the vestry. 3 cameras on the perimeter, probably more inside." Eden leaned over his shoulder, noting access points. "The restoration workshop would be perfect cover. No one questions conservators poking around old buildings." "We'll need equipment that looks legitimate." "Already thought of that." She pulled out her phone, showing him photos of specialized solvents. "These come in bottles identical to hair products. I can decant them, label them as styling items." His lips quirked. "Clever." They spent the next hours preparing, moving with the synchronized efficiency they'd developed at the museum. Eden mixed chemicals while Kellen arranged surveillance gear, their domesticity punctuated by strategy discussions. The elevator's soft chime at noon made them both tense. Caro Bellini stepped out, elegant as always in cream silk, carrying a pink bakery box. "I thought our lovely couple might need sustenance," she smiled, setting down perfectly arranged pastries. Such busy days, planning a wedding while managing other matters. Eden accepted a croissant with appropriate gratitude, watching Caro's careful movements. The older woman's attention kept drifting to the desk where they'd accidentally left a notepad visible, the false safe house address clearly written. "My dear," Caro touched Eden's arm, "I've been thinking, perhaps somewhere quieter would be safer for you. I know a lovely property on the north side." "The one on Maple Street?" Kellen asked mildly, and Eden felt the trap closing as Caro's eyes lit with false concern. "Yes, exactly. So peaceful there. Perfect for keeping our Eden out of harm's way." They maintained the charade through Caro's visit, nodding at her suggestions while cataloging every tell, the 2 casual glances at papers, the pointed questions about timing. When the elevator finally whisked her away, Eden let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "She'll report to Rocco within the hour," Kellen said, already texting Benny. "If you get any messages about meeting, about anything..." "Benny shadows me. I stick to the plan." Eden touched his arm. "I won't take their bait." "Good." He pulled her closer, pressing his lips to her temple. "Because I'm not losing anyone else to hesitation or trust." They spent the afternoon preparing, Eden drilling Kellen on conservation terminology, while he taught her to recognize surveillance patterns. As evening approached, they drove past the chapel in an unmarked car, noting guard rotations and camera angles. The old stone building looked peaceful in the fading light, its Gothic architecture softened by ivy. But Eden counted 4 armed men trying to look casual in civilian clothes, and Kellen's tablet showed at least 6 active security feeds. "They're protecting something valuable," she whispered, making notes about access points and sightlines. "Multiple somethings, probably." Kellen's eyes never stopped scanning. Rocco likes to spread his assets around, make it harder to hit everything at once. They completed 3 circuits before heading back to the penthouse. Eden found herself fighting exhaustion as they reviewed the footage, her head growing heavy against Kellen's shoulder as he flicked through camera feeds on his tablet. "Sleep," he murmured, adjusting so she could settle more comfortably. "Tomorrow we move." "Together," she mumbled, already drifting. His arm tightened around her. "Together." The word followed her into dreams where it mixed with memories of his hands on her skin, his voice rough with need and promise. Even in sleep, she felt the weight of his protection, the heat of his regard. Tomorrow would bring danger and decisions, but tonight there was just this: the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath her cheek, the security of his embrace, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as one. The city lights painted patterns across the ceiling, and somewhere in the harbor, boats sounded their lonely horns. But here in the quiet of Kellen's office, with his heartbeat under her ear and his fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm, Eden found a peace she hadn't expected. The danger hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown more complex with every revelation. But she was no longer facing it alone, and that made all the difference. Kellen continued his vigil, one hand holding the tablet, the other curved protectively around her shoulder. The camera feeds cycled endlessly, showing the chapel from every angle, while his security teams reported in with quiet efficiency. Tomorrow would require precision, courage, and the perfect balance of force and finesse. But for now, he allowed himself this moment of stillness, this precious weight of trust against his chest, this chance to be both weapon and shelter for the woman who had somehow become essential to his world. Eden's phone buzzed at dawn, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. Her stomach clenched as she read the message. "Emergency. Meet me at the safe house in 1 hour. Come alone." She found Kellen in his office, already dressed in a charcoal suit that did nothing to soften his dangerous edges. His expression hardened as he read the text. "Not Bianca," he said, voice clipped. "The syntax is wrong." Eden nodded, having noticed the same thing. Bianca's messages were always precise, professional. This felt staged, like bait designed to prey on her concern for her friend. "We can use this," Kellen continued, already typing rapid commands into his phone. "Spring their trap with layers they won't expect." Benny appeared within minutes, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. "I'll have eyes on her from the moment she exits the tower." Kellen pulled something small and silver from his desk, a delicate cufflink that matched Eden's blouse. "Tracking device," he explained, fastening it with careful fingers. "They'll check for obvious tech, but this should pass." Eden's heart hammered as she drove the borrowed sedan toward the safe house address. Every traffic light felt like an eternity, every turn a potential ambush point. In her earpiece, Benny's calm voice tracked her progress. The building looked innocuous enough: red brick, clean windows, potted plants by the door. Eden's hands trembled slightly as she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Caro Bellini waited in apartment 3C, elegant as always in a pale gray suit. A silver tray held coffee service for 2, and beside it, barely visible, lay a hypodermic needle cap. "My dear," Caro's smile never reached her eyes. So prompt. Movement from the kitchen drew Eden's attention. 2 men emerged, both wearing shoulder holsters under their jackets. One took up position by the door, while the other approached with zip ties. "Phone and jewelry, please." Caro held out a manicured hand. Eden surrendered her phone, watching helplessly as Caro's fingers found the cufflink. The older woman's smile widened as she dropped it into a water glass. "Did Kellen think we wouldn't check?" She sighed. "Such a predictable boy, for all his reputation." Across the street, Benny swore as his video feed went dark. "Contact lost, moving to intercept." But they'd planned for this too. A black van idled in the alley, engine already running. The men hustled Eden down the back stairs and into its darkness before Benny's team could breach the apartment. In the command center, Kellen's voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Lock down every dock from here to the state line. Call in every marker, every favor. No one leaves this city." The underworld machinery ground into motion. Warehouse gates slammed shut. Harbor patrols doubled. Every street camera fed into Kellen's screens as the city contracted around them like a closing fist. The van wound through side streets, taking turns at random to shake any tail. Eden counted seconds, trying to map their route by feel. Left, right, straight for 3 minutes, another right, the hollow thump of their tires crossing train tracks. When they finally stopped, rough hands guided her through cool air that smelled of water and diesel. Then up worn steps into a space where her footsteps echoed differently. Higher ceilings, harder floors. The chapel looked nothing like the Mariner Hotel's gilded ballroom. Here, age darkened the rafters, and stained glass filtered the morning light into colored shadows. Candles flickered on the altar, more theatrical than devotional. They secured her to a heavy wooden pew, the zip ties biting into her wrists. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, Eden's conservator's instincts kicked in despite her fear. The pews weren't original to the space. The wood was wrong for the period. And the rails… She shifted slightly, testing the attachment points. The rails were hollow, she was certain of. It perfect channels for hiding thin items like ledger pages, running the length of each pew in plain sight. Eden forced herself to breathe slowly, gathering details while she could. The air carried notes of damp wood and old incense. Water sounds suggested the river was close. Through high windows, she glimpsed industrial cranes. They were still in the port district. One of the men spoke quietly into a phone. Package secured, awaiting further instructions. Eden tested the zip ties again, careful to keep the movement subtle. The plastic was industrial grade, no give at all, but they hadn't searched her hair thoroughly, and the small metal clip holding her twist in place might provide an edge if she could reach it. Footsteps on the stone floor made her go still. Caro appeared, phone in hand, textbook efficiency in every line of her body. "Rocco will be here soon," she said, checking her watch. "He's quite looking forward to meeting you properly. No bullets or scopes this time." Eden met her gaze steadily. Does betrayal pay well these days? Better than loyalty. Caro's smile was genuine this time. The Morettis forgot that power requires constant pressure. Rocco understands the value of spectacular examples. More footsteps outside, voices approaching. Eden's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. Somewhere in the city, Kellen was closing the net. She just had to stay alive and alert until then. The morning light shifted through the stained glass, painting jewel-toned patterns across the floor. Eden followed their movement, marking the passage of time while cataloging every detail that might matter. The number of guards, the layout of exits, the hollow spaces in those carefully crafted pew rails that might hold the very pages that had started all of this. She thought of Kellen's words from just hours ago. Together. It wasn't a promise he would break easily. So she waited, watched, and prepared herself for whatever would come through those chapel doors next. The chapel's evening shadows stretched like bruises across the stone floor. Eden's shoulders ached from hours of sitting bound, but her mind stayed sharp, cataloging every detail. The guards had settled into a lazy rotation, 3 minutes by the north door, 5 by the altar, 2 smoking breaks per hour. She waited until the next shift change, when footsteps echoed from the vestibule. With practiced sleight of hand, she worked the metal hairpin from her twist, its tip already filed to a point. The small vial of solvent she'd hidden in her hair, disguised as dry shampoo that morning, came next. Her hands trembled slightly as she pierced the seal. The chemical smell was faint but distinctive, a conservator's tool meant for dissolving old adhesives. Eden let 3 precious drops fall onto the zip tie's locking mechanism, then carefully fogged the nearest security camera with the fumes. The plastic began to soften, becoming tacky and pliable. Counting. Heartbeats. She worked her right hand back and forth, ignoring the bite of edges into her skin. The guard's radio crackled, something about movement at the perimeter. Eden redoubled her efforts, sweat beading at her temples. There, her hand slipped free. She tucked the pin back into her hair, forcing steady breaths as boots scraped on stone outside. A door slammed somewhere in the building. Voices rose in sharp bursts. The explosion came from 2 directions at once, flashbangs that turned the stained glass into kaleidoscope bursts. Eden ducked as figures in tactical gear breached through smoke, moving with practiced efficiency. She recognized Kellen's fluid grace even before she saw his face, Benny, and 4 others fanning out behind him. Contact! A guard's shout turned to gurgling as Kellen's team engaged. Gunfire erupted in controlled bursts. Eden stayed low, working on her second restraint while chaos erupted around her, the air filled with cordite and shouting. Movement caught her eye. Caro emerging from behind a column, pistol raised toward Kellen's exposed back. But before Eden could shout a warning, another figure appeared. Enzo, his usual easy smile, replaced by cold focus, grabbed Caro's wrist and twisted. The crack of breaking bone carried even over the firefight. The gun clattered to the floor as Enzo forced Caro to her knees. "Sorry, I'm late to the party." His voice held none of its usual warmth. "Been busy running numbers? Interesting thing about long-term embezzlement. It leaves patterns if you know where to look." Eden didn't wait to hear more. She scrambled toward the pew rail she'd been studying all day, fingers finding the subtle seam where decorative cap met hollow channel. The wood gave way with a soft pop, revealing a leather folio tucked inside. A spotlight exploded overhead, showering glass. Eden clutched the folio to her chest and moved toward the center aisle where Kellen was advancing. Fresh blood stained his collar. Not his own, she prayed, and his expression held a fury that made her breath catch. He reached her in 3 long strides, One hand extended, while the other kept his weapon trained on the remaining threats. Their fingers brushed as she passed him the folio. "You couldn't just wait in the car?" His voice was rough, with something more than anger. "You wouldn't have found it without me." Eden touched his arm where the blood had dried. "Not yours." "Rocco's driver. He chose poorly." Kellen's free hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. The tenderness of it contrasted sharply with the violence still echoing through the chapel. "I can't lose you? Not to this game." Eden leaned into his touch for just a moment. "Then let's finish it. Together." Around them, Kellen's team secured the scene with brutal efficiency. Enzo had Caro zip-tied with her own restraints, her broken wrist already purpling. The former consigliere's composed mask had cracked, showing the fear beneath. Benny appeared at Kellen's shoulder, radio crackling. "Perimeter's clear. Rocco's car was spotted heading for the marina, but harbor patrol's already moving to intercept." "Good." Kellen's hand dropped from Eden's face, but stayed close, hovering protectively. "Get our guest comfortable. I want to know every contact, every account, every whisper she's passed to Rocco in the last decade." Eden watched as they led Caro away, the older woman's shoulders straight despite her circumstances. Pride before the fall, she thought, remembering all those careful smiles and subtle manipulations. The folio felt heavy in Kellen's hands, years of secrets bound in cracking leather. Eden could see why people killed for it, died for it. Power always left a paper trail, even in the digital age. "You know," she said quietly, "normal couples do dinner and movies for date night." That earned her a ghost of a smile. "Since when are we normal?" "Fair point." Eden surveyed the chapel's wreckage, shattered glass, scorched wood, brass casings scattered like fallen stars across the stone. "Though next time, maybe we skip the kidnapping part." "Next time," Kellen promised, and the weight of those two words settled around them like a shield. Through the broken windows, police sirens wailed in the distance, the city's usual symphony playing counterpoint to their private war. Eden knew there would be questions, cleanup, consequences to face, but for now she let herself lean against Kellen's solid warmth, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. The ledger was found, the mole exposed, the trap sprung and survived. They had won this round together, each bringing their own strengths to the fight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face those the same way, her precision matched with his power, her insight with his iron will. Enzo appeared beside them, straightening his cuffs as if this were just another business meeting. "Cleanup crew's 5 minutes out. Might want to move this reunion somewhere more private." The chapel doors crashed open under Kellen's hand, wood splintering as they hit the walls. Rain swept in behind them, carrying the scent of gunpowder and wet stone. The nave stretched long and dark ahead, lit only by emergency floods and the occasional flash of lightning through broken windows. "Rocco!" Kellen's voice filled the space with lethal calm. "You wanted a show. Come take your bow." Eden stood just behind his shoulder, phone ready, the ledger pages already scanned and formatted. Her fingers hovered over the send button, a digital trigger aimed at Rocco's carefully constructed world. Movement flickered in the shadows near the altar. Rocco emerged, elegant even now in his tailored suit, though his usual theatrical smile had hardened to something ugly. The prodigal couple arrives. He spread his arms wide, claiming the space. "Though I must say, your timing needs work. The ceremony's already over." "Always about the performance with you." Kellen advanced slowly, keeping Eden protected behind him. "But tonight's show is going to play differently." Eden's phone buzzed with confirmation messages, key reporters and officials receiving the first wave of documents. She nodded to Kellen, and he smiled, cold and sharp. "See, while you were staging this little drama, we've been busy," Kellen's voice carried to every corner. "Those ledger pages you wanted so badly, they're being broadcast right now. Every bribe judge, every bought cop, every politician in your pocket, all of it hitting inboxes across the city." Rocco's mask slipped, revealing raw fury beneath. "You're bluffing." "Check your phone," Eden called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The notifications should be starting right about now." As if on cue, Rocco's phone began to chime repeatedly. Each alert seemed to strip away another layer of his composure until only rage remained. "You stupid little bitch!" he snarled, reaching into his jacket. Kellen moved faster than Eden could track. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Rocco pinned against a pew, the older man's gun skittering across the stone floor. The impact was brutal, efficient, a A predator's killing strike held just short of completion. Through the chaos, Eden caught movement in her peripheral vision. Bianca emerged from behind a pillar, gun trained on Caro, who had tried to slip away in the shadows. The museum director's hands were rock steady. "For my family," Bianca said softly and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Caro crumpled without a sound, payment collected in full for all her quiet betrayals. Enzo appeared at the main doors, his usual smile replaced by focused intensity. "Perimeter's secured. Our friends in blue are 3 minutes out. The right ones this time." Eden's phone kept buzzing as more confirmations rolled in. The story was spreading like wildfire through the city's digital nervous system. Too big to bury, too public to ignore. She could almost feel Rocco's empire crumbling with each new notification. "You have no idea what you've done," Rocco spat, still struggling against Kellen's hold. "The people I know are currently scrambling to distance themselves from you," Kellen cut him off. Amazing how quickly rats abandon a sinking ship. More of Kellen's men filtered in, securing exits and gathering evidence. The chapel's sacred hush had been replaced by efficient movement and crackling radios. Outside, sirens grew closer, their wail mixing with the storm. Enzo coordinated with someone on his phone, his voice carrying clearly in the space. "Yes, Captain, we have both primary targets contained. Evidence is secured and witnesses are ready to make statements." Eden watched as Rocco seemed to deflate, his theatrical presence shrinking as reality set in. All his careful manipulations, his staged moments of power, had been undone by truth and timing. "It's over," she said, not quite believing it herself. "Actually over." Kellen's men took custody of Rocco, securing him with professional efficiency. The former power broker didn't resist. His audience was gone. His performance finally ended. Bianca approached Eden, holstering her weapon with hands that now shook slightly. "I suppose I should tender my resignation from the museum." "Or take a very long vacation," Eden suggested, surprising herself by pulling the older woman into a quick hug. "Thank you for making it right in the end." Red and blue lights began to strobe through the broken windows, casting strange shadows across the chapel's ornate walls. Enzo directed their allies to the front while sending their own people out the back, a careful dance of legitimate authority and necessary shadows. Kellen returned to Eden's side, one hand settling warm and steady at the small of her back. "Ready to go?" She looked around the chapel one last time. Broken glass glittered on the stone floor like scattered stars. The altar candles had been knocked over in the fight, wax pooling in sacred patterns. Even the rain seemed to be easing, as if nature itself recognized the shift in power. "More than ready," she answered. They moved together toward the shattered doors, stepping carefully around the debris of their private war. Eden felt the weight of the past few days, the fear, the chase, the final confrontation beginning to lift. "The hard part's done," Kellen said quietly, reading her thoughts as they emerged into the wet night. "What's left is just cleanup and consequence." The rain fell soft now, more blessing than storm. Eden tilted her face up to it, letting it wash away the chapel's dust and gunpowder residue. Kellen's arm tightened around her waist, anchoring her in the moment. Behind them, official voices filled the chapel. Before them stretched the city, its lights blurred by rain and distance. They had fought for this peace, earned it with blood and courage and careful planning. Sirens still wailed in the distance, but they were background noise now, part of the city's normal rhythm rather than harbingers of danger. The war that had started with a wrong turn at a wedding was ending with a different kind of ceremony, justice dispensed in a sacred space, truth breaking through like dawn after a long night. 3 weeks slipped by like water, washing away headlines and gunsmoke memories. The morning sun streamed through the museum's restored windows, catching dust motes that danced above Eden's desk. She tapped her pen against a fresh grant proposal, the routine of it almost strange after so much chaos. Down the hall, the rhythmic beeping of electronic tools signaled another security upgrade. The Anonymous Foundation, which Eden strongly suspected had Moretti fingerprints all over it, had insisted on state-of-the-art everything: motion sensors, biometric locks, and enough cameras to make Fort Knox jealous. Ms. Clark, her new assistant, poked her head in. "The technicians need approval for the vault modifications." Eden smiled at the formality. She was still adjusting to her promotion. Head of Conservation had a nice ring to it, especially since the board's emergency reshuffle had swept out all of Rocco's hidden influences. "I'll be right there." The vault's reinforced door gleamed under fresh paint. The security consultant, a former military type with careful eyes, walked her through the upgrades. Eden nodded along, understanding enough to know this was Kellen's way of keeping her safe without keeping her caged. The day stretched into evening, peaceful in its ordinariness. Staff filtered out as closing time approached, leaving only the night guard and the soft hum of climate control systems. Eden gathered her things, ready to head home, when the guard's radio crackled. "Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. Mr. Moretti." Her heart did a familiar skip. "Where?" "Gallery 3. Says it'll just take a minute." Eden found Kellen alone in the medieval wing, surrounded by gilt-framed saints and martyrs. He'd come without his usual shadow of guards, just him in a perfectly tailored suit that somehow looked both dangerous and right against the backdrop of centuries-old art. "Checking on your investment," she teased, nodding toward the new security panel by the door. "Something like that." His voice was low, intimate in the gallery's hushed air. Aiden started to walk toward him, but he held up a hand, stopping her. The gesture was gentle, but carried that core of steel she'd come to know so well. Then, with grace that still surprised her, he lowered himself to one knee. Her breath caught. "I'm not good with flowery speeches," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. "I kill people who threaten what's mine. I break things that need breaking. But with you—" He opened the box, revealing a ring that managed to be both elegant and somehow fierce. "With you, I want to build something, be something, a shelter instead of a weapon." Eden's vision blurred slightly. This man who could order executions with a phone call was looking up at her with raw honesty in his eyes. "I'm lethal to the world," he continued, "but I'll be a home to you, if you'll have me." She laughed, a bright, relieved sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Yes, of course, yes." The ring slid onto her finger like it had always belonged there. A week later, they gathered on a rooftop garden as sunset painted the city gold. No press, no spectacle, just the people who mattered. Enzo had gotten officially ordained for the occasion, his usual smirk softened into something genuine as he led them through their vows. Bianca signed the register with steady hands, her signature bold and clear, no more hiding, no more debt. She'd taken a month's sabbatical after everything, returned looking years younger, and threw herself into helping Eden restructure the conservation department. Benny lurked at the edges of the small crowd, professional even at a wedding, though Eden caught him sneaking an extra slice of cake when he thought no one was watching. The man who'd helped keep her alive during those crazy days had become something like family. The party wound down as stars emerged above the city lights. Eden changed from her wedding dress into something simpler, and Kellen drove them back to the museum. He'd arranged for after-hours access, one last piece of his gift to her. They moved through the empty galleries, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. Eden's new locket, a wedding present from Kellen, held a tiny folded blueprint of her ring, engraved with a single word: mine. Not a claim of ownership, but a promise of belonging. Kellen pulled her close as they reached the medieval gallery where he'd proposed. Someone had patched the bullet holes and restored the old paintings, but Eden could still feel the echoes of that night when everything changed. Wrong door, wrong wedding, right man. "Dance with me," he asked, already swaying them to music only he could hear. Eden leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with gun oil. Through the windows, the city spread out below them, finely still. No sirens, no threats, no need for lies or masks or careful maneuvering. Just peace, hard-won and precious. They moved together in the quiet, surrounded by watching saints and filtered starlight. Eden thought about the path that had led here. Ledger fragments and gunfire, betrayal and loyalty, fear and fierce love. Every piece necessary to build this moment. "What are you thinking?" Kellen's voice rumbled against her cheek. "That I'm glad I went through the wrong door that night." His laugh was soft, private, a sound for her alone. "So am I." They kept dancing as midnight approached, two shadows moving through pools of security lights. The museum that had started it all now stood as silent witness to their beginning, not an ending, but a threshold crossed into something new. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, but here in their private sanctuary, time seemed to pause. No more running, no more hidden codes or secret fragments. Just them together, ready to build a life that could stand in full daylight.